we have skills, we have resources. What do we need to be doing to mobilize ourselves so that we can best impact the sector and bring a sense of security and hope and potential, and resilience, to the communities that we serve? It's time to refocus and revisit our mission and our core priorities. So if maybe some of our programs got into some mission drift, they might be beloved programs, but it might be time to sunset those for a while. This is a time that calls private foundations to, which we've seen them do in the past, give at the higher level than the 5% they're accustomed to giving to. And community foundations in general are already doing that, and it's just in their DNA, right, to be responsive and give at those higher levels.
It ain't easy being a nonprofit executive or staff member or volunteer or board member. So Janet, we know that evaluation is very important, and it's something that should be ongoing. It shouldn't just be a one-shot deal. It should be an ongoing process. It's a way to manage your organization. It's a way to tell funders that you're doing what you said you were going to do. It also improves the world because it tells you what's working and what doesn't. But here's the thing. We need funding to do all of these things. We need fuel to move our train down those tracks, right? And right now, we're in a very uncertain situation. We have government funding being cut in the millions and millions of dollars, especially in the sciences where the big funding is, or education. We have donors who are dealing with a volatile stock market, and they have to plan how they're going to give money, and when it's going up 2,000 points and dropping 1,000 points every other day, there's a lot of uncertainty there. There's an uncertainty about just the state of the world. Look, we got a lot of conflict going on. We have a lot of people who are homeless there, not just in the United States, but worldwide. And there are a lot of problems out there. How do we deal with this individually? And then how do we deal with it as an organization or a volunteer board member in an organization? How do we deal with all this stuff?
Yeah. Oh, I wish I had that magic wand that
Well, that's why I asked you. I thought maybe, you had the answer,
Yeah. No, I think.
What are some steps we can take at least?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think as nonprofit leaders are passionate about those missions. They're passionate about the work. When that work is threatened and the capacity to do that work, it's a huge emotional hit, right? So, but at the same time, as nonprofit leaders and as sector leaders, that's part of our calling, is in times of trouble, in times of uncertainty, we have to find for ourselves what nourishes us and what feeds us, and so that we can bring hope to those who are going to be most impacted by the loss of those services and loss of those programs. And so I think a lot about the intentional surrounding of ourselves with those who inspire us. I mentioned earlier part of a community of practice with regard to ripple effects mapping. Going there, we can grieve a little bit together, but we can also just learn a great deal. And when you're around like-minded people who are passionate about the same things, it can really invigorate and really inspire through hard times, through uncertainty. I'm part of a facilitators learning guild that we meet very regularly. You spend some time with some grieving, but frankly, we mostly move to, we have skills, we have resources. What do we need to be doing to mobilize ourselves so that we can best impact the sector and bring a sense of security and hope and potential, and resilience, to the community that we serve, the communities that we serve. And those are just like they're my food right now. These are the groups that nourish us. And so engaging with our peers and our colleagues and vibrant conversations about, the sector, just really important things. So creating spaces for grieving. We don't grieve very well as a culture all the time, but so creating spaces for grief to be processed and for storytelling to be engaged and us to hear from each other, but then also really creating those spaces where we're surrounded by those who inspire us, I think is really core. I think in terms of like board members and nonprofit leaders. And we saw this during the Great Recession, a time when resources just scaled back significantly. It's time to refocus and revisit our mission and our core priorities. So if we maybe some of our programs got into some mission drift, they might be beloved programs, but it might be time to sunset those for a while, and say, okay, we need to really focus on our core mission and bring clarity to that and help our board members. That's what you're there for, board. You're there to really be well versed in your mission and those core services. This is the time to bring those discussions.
And what I've found is that during good times, a lot of organizations tend to chase the money, right? So if there's a federal grant out there, or a state grant that funds a particular program that isn't really what they do, but it's kind of related, they might go after that and do a program there because they've got enough money to do their other programs, but it helps pay salaries and things like that. But when the economy goes bad and funding is cut, you have to make those hard decisions. You really have to focus on your mission and say, does this still serve us? My experience during 2008, when we had the economic bust during the pandemic, was that especially community foundations went above and beyond the 5% that they usually give away and went up to 7, 8, some of them 10%, because they had made a lot of money in the stock market previous, and they felt that now was the time for need. I know private foundations did that. Federal funding, probably not so much because they were holding back on the federal budgets. But as far as giving hope, I think funders have been pretty sympathetic during these down times. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. At a community foundation, certainly during the pandemic, when the market was strong, we saw, huge contributions come in, and we're able to mobilize those really, really rapidly. When the market's hurting like it is, that creates other dynamics. But in general, people are responsive, donors are responsive during hard times. And I think we'll see that it'll be more like in fits and starts, this time around in terms of how that's going to go. So, but to your point, I think that's right. This is a time that calls private foundations to, which we've seen them do in the past, give at the higher level than the 5% they're accustomed to giving to. And community foundations in general are already doing that. And it's just in their DNA, right, to be responsive and give at those higher levels. But community foundations can play other really important roles in terms of being leaders of the creating a sense of resiliency within the sector. So I think community foundations play a really important role in having a clear and effective messaging during times of uncertainty within the sector. Our local Jenny Flynn, the executive director of the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, where I am, has been doing these fabulous letters, digital letters, the steady saguaro, essentially, recognizing and encouraging others to stay informed from your local news outlets, stay the part of our charge and giving us a sense of taking action is to be educated about what's happening. What is happening in our nonprofit sector? Who is suffering, or who's being creative, and let's celebrate those things. She's been doing a great job of sort of talking about being in community. Be in community with your neighbors, with your people who are passionate about the same missions that you are. It is that community where we gain strength from one another. Creating community foundations can play a really important role in giving awards for those organizations that are doing great, or that are finding those creative solutions, that are finding that are communicating well, that are doing those good feedback loops, that are talking regularly with their constituents and their service recipients, and are getting insights from the wisdom of those people with lived experience and then getting that information out in the community quickly so that the community can respond quickly. Because this is what we need, right? When we're in these times of uncertainty, we feel helpless. And what we need to do is be creating opportunities for people to help in meaningful ways. And so those feedback loops, a core time right now. And recognizing that those individuals that a lot of these nonprofits serve, they have long histories of resiliency, of difficult times of uncertainty and coming back and going around. And there's a lot of wisdom from that we can learn from. And so bringing them onto our boards and into our decision-making environments and getting their wisdom and insight is a really core time to do that. Getting them in front of the microphone in our community events, and can be very uplifting in a time and very promising in a time where we all need it.
And I think that having a track record of success, because you've done your evaluation, you've checked on your ripple effect to see what that is, that seems to me that it would be very, very advantageous to share that information with funders because they do want to fund successful programs. Nobody wants to fund a program that they're not sure of, or it's unproven, or an organization that maybe has been a little shaky. But if you have evaluated your successes and you have been pretty consistent, it seems to me that funders would say, wow, that's really what we need right now. Let's get behind this program and see what they want. And I know there have been some foundations that have actually reached out to institutions and organizations and said, look, we've got a problem here that we think is important, and we'd like you, if you feel this is in your wheelhouse, to write a proposal to us because we think it's an important problem to be solved. I don't know if you did that in your community foundation, but I see that happening, especially with private foundations that have a lot of assets.
Most definitely. I mean, that is a role that funders should be playing for the same reasons nonprofits struggle. Sometimes capacity doesn't lend itself to do that. But yes, when funders are positioned to see those insights, and funders, we're the ones that are in the position to sort of access the emerging trends and the scholarly resources, and we're in that translational role to translate that to our sectors. And that's often what is the impetus behind an RFP, where there's some insights that have been observed at the funder level. So yeah, reaching out to organizations, and every funder, every nonprofit is charged with the same good listening skills. Like you can put your RFP out there, but if nobody has the capacity right then to respond to it, then it's time for the funder to dig deeper. Okay, how can we collectively address this issue in really creative ways?
Right. Well, I've always said that nonprofits have to look at funders and nonprofits as a partnership, not as a hand-in-hand kind of relationship. Because the fact is that funders have to give away money. I mean, it's their mandate, right? Even the government has programs where they have no choice. They really have to give away the money. And organizations need the money to accomplish their mission. So they need each other. And so anything you can do to help direct that, I use the train analogy, direct that train of nonprofits down a track, which is their strategic plan, their programs, whatever. And any fuel you can give to that train is absolutely necessary during these times of need. We have to look at this as a partnership. There has to be this open flow of information. Sounds to me that's kind of what you're saying here, is that exchange of information, communication is actually a primary key here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, and that's key at every level of an organization and then community wide. I mean, so the encouragement to sort of tap your local news can be exhausting. News can be draining,
Yeah.
but find out your local news, outlets that are talking about what's happening locally, that can have the opposite effect. That can be really exciting because then your helplessness can be dissipated because you can see where you can plug into that system in a way that really creates meaningful help. So this is a great time to volunteer, to surround yourself with people who inspire you, whose stories inspire you, and a time to really engage your community partners, those for whom your mission exists, to gain their wisdom and incorporate it in your communications and in your continued passion for the missions that we all have.
Well, Janet, thank you. Are there any other parting words you would like to share with us before we end?
I think that this is a time for when we're in times of urgency and times of crisis. Those are also pivotal moments and opportunities for positive change to occur. So yes, we are in store for some stress and some hard times, and we're in the midst of them, and probably many more to come. But as a sector, this is also a time to really listen and learn, reach out to people, have those hard conversations, ask them those questions about what they're observing, where do they see opportunities for change, where are there opportunities for efficiencies, for affiliations, for collectively addressing our challenging issues. There's opportunities here, and we're gonna come out of this just as we came out of the pandemic, with some deeper wisdom, some insights, and some new inspiration for things to come.
Great. Well, listen, Janet, I really appreciate that you've come on to share all of your wisdom with us. I would like to say thank you to you and your consulting company. And if any of our listeners want to get in contact with you, we've got your web link below, your email, and we really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us, because we certainly need that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. It's been my pleasure.
Well, that ends our 4-part interview series with Janet Hansel and her company, Grant Street Consulting, based in Tucson, Arizona. Now that you have learned how to evaluate your programs and organization, and you've heard advice on the importance of collaboration, and you've been given tips on how to weather these difficult times, it's important to let the world know who you are and what you do. That brings us to nonprofit marketing. Nonprofit marketing is an absolute necessity in this age of social media. And our next guest, Roger Cave, is not only an expert in nonprofit marketing, he is also the CEO of an international nonprofit that gives new eyesight to thousands of people around the world. So stay tuned for a powerful lesson in nonprofit marketing with Roger Cave in this video right here.